I'm Dina Henson, Head of Adult Services at Percival Library, and your host today. Please feel free to send me your comments and questions during the program by using the chat feature, and I will relay them to Jan during and at the end of the program. A lifelong gardener, Jan Lane became a registered horticultural therapist in 2016. She works with patients recovering from spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injuries, and strokes during inpatient rehabilitation. She serves on the board of the Mid-Atlantic Horticultural Therapy Network and is a member of the Loudoun County Master Gardeners. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Dina. Great to be here. I appreciate that introduction. We're enjoying that very special time of year, awesome April. The spring colors, the plants bursting into bloom, and the warm weather really brings our spirits alive after the long gray days of winter. We feel more alive, right? Our gardens are putting on quite a show. Tonight, we're going to focus on the health benefits, physical and mental, of engaging with your garden. Specifically, how can we use gardening as a means of self-care, as a way to reduce stress, improve our moods, get exercise, and more importantly, restore our energy. First, let me share a bit of my background. In 2012, I became a Virginia Cooperative Extension Master Gardener. Part of that training involved working in the demo garden in Leesburg. If you haven't been to the demonstration garden, it is a fantastic place to learn. It is located adjacent to the Ida Lee Recreation Center, and the purpose of the garden is to educate the public on sustainable gardening techniques, how to grow vegetables and perennials in our area, and the children's garden is delightful. The produce grown in the garden is donated to Loudoun Hunger Relief. Before joining the program, I worked in the district in high-stress positions, requiring long hours and a grueling commute from Northern Virginia into the district. Often, I'd leave before the sun came up and not get home until late evening. There wasn't time during the day to get outside for a walk. I'm sure many of you are experiencing the same thing. I used to joke that I was hermetically sealed, going from my garage to the garage at work. It was exhausting and it was draining. I truly did not realize the toll that this disconnection from nature had taken until working in the demonstration garden one morning as part of my training requirements. Norma Lee Martin, who many of you know, had asked me to crawl under the bird netting and pick the right blueberries for donation to the Loudoun Relief Program. Well, it was muddy, I was in a cramped position, but it was the happiest I had been in a very long time. That experience was an eye-opener. What was it about being outside, hearing the birds chirping, appreciating that unique bright spring green of the leaves popping, and engaging with the blueberry bushes? Why was that so soothing? Why was I feeling so much better? Well, as I undertook more of my horticultural studies, I came to learn about the concept posited by E.O. Wilson about biophilia, or what commonly is known as the people-plant connection. Biophilia is that innately emotional affiliation of human beings to other living organisms, and it's hereditary. It's part of our ultimate human nature. Our dependence on nature extends far beyond our reliance on plants and animals for food and sustenance. Wilson and others have found that it includes a human craving for the aesthetic, intellectual, cognitive, and spiritual aspects of nature. Sue Stuart Smith, in her book, The Well-Gardened Mind, states that biophilia is, quote, based on the fact that the natural world was the main influence on the evolution of our cognitive and emotional functioning. People who were the most attuned to nature and most predisposed to learn about plants and animals would have survived better. Because we no longer commune with the natural world on a daily basis, we don't develop the same level of attunement, but it still lies latent in all of us. This connection is hardwired into our brains from our hunter-gatherer days. Many of you have read Richard Lou's books where he talks eloquently about the need to reconnect ourselves, our children, our grandchildren with nature, and the importance of what he calls vitamin N, or vitamin nature. Research suggests that spending even a small amount of time in nature can increase our happiness and esteem, lower our blood pressure. This has been proven through numerous studies that can be found within the Journal of Therapeutic Horticulture. Also, reduce our levels of stress, anger, and depression. It'll enhance our performance on cognitive tasks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation when we talk about the theory of attention restoration. It's also been proven to improve our immune system activity. Many of you know that the bacteria that is in the soil can be of benefit. It also fosters a sense of community and generosity. As a horticultural therapist at a Nova Mount Vernon rehab setting, I get to see firsthand how reconnecting patients with nature can promote healing following strokes, traumatic brain injuries, amputations due to diabetes, or joint replacements. A hort therapist uses gardening and nature activities to help clients reach their physical, cognitive, and social emotional goals. A horticultural therapist requires a 480-hour internship and approximately 36 credits in a variety of sciences. So it is similar to a master's program. Working with physical, occupational, speech, and recreation therapists, my work involves creating and developing gardening activities that will help patients continue to work on their goals outside of the hospital, outside of the gym, outside of a clinical setting. And believe me, they have a lot more fun doing the same motions that they were doing in the gym outside in the garden. I think that's the same for all of us. So how can we take some of those lessons and use them for our own self-care, using plant care as self-care? You probably have seen this poster around. It's a reminder that some of the most obvious benefits of gardening are developing our large muscle groups, seriously focusing on our physical health through the exercise that we get in gardens. It is also a physical exercise with one of the lowest rates of injury, something that those of us who are in retirement age come to rely on. Weight-bearing activities like digging, weeding can improve muscle strength and bone density. In addition to building muscle strength, people can increase flexibility, range of motion, endurance, agility, while at the same time reducing those cortisol levels that are caused by stress and our blood pressure. Best of all, according to the CDC, a person weighing about approximately 150 pounds can burn 330 calories per hour working in their garden. That's enough to get me out there. A report last week also stated that a number of developers of fitness apps are touting gardening as the new fitness trend and trying to incorporate it into their apps. I have yet to see the Apple Watch do it, however. But it makes sense. Think about the movements that we make when we're working in the garden: reaching, grasping, squatting, stooping. But just like other exercises, stretching before beginning to garden can help reduce sore muscles and the risk of injury. And like other exercise, you need to gradually increase the amount of time you spend in the garden. It sounds like an outdoor exercise class, but it is one that you can take at your own pace. And that's the key, isn't it? Nature reminds us to go at the pace of life. We tend to have our mind full of, data. What do we have to do next? Engaging with so many electronic devices during the day, that mindfulness is a practice that we have to consciously pursue. With our wired world, that pace of life and impact of information overload from endless news cycles, social media, and doom scrolling takes a toll on our mental health. Many of us spend our days working online, leaving us mentally tired. A study in 2019 found that the average person in the US spent 6 hours and 31 minutes on electronic devices, and that was before the pandemic. This type of work and engagement with technology requires what's known as directed attention. In the 1980s, doctors Rachel and Stephen Kaplan articulated the theory of attention restoration and how natural settings are an effective way of giving our task-focused minds a breather and restoring our mental energy. Our high-tech environment focuses us into directed attention. That's the type of attention that requires us to block out all other stimuli. It requires focus, concentration, and effort. If we're continually exposed to directed attention, it leads to attention fatigue, what many of us feel at the end of a day being on the computer. To have a restorative experience, it requires involuntary or effortless attention. That type of experience then leads to restored energy. While many activities can provide a break from directed attention, activities that actually restore energy involve 4 components. So a restorative environment is one that evokes fascination, and fascination subsequently evokes awe and wonder. If we experience involuntary, effortless attention, that will provide the psychic relief we need, and that's what comes from fascination. We also, in a restorative environment, get a sense of being away from the normal environment that was causing us stress, but just that breather of getting away. And it has to have the extent of feeling like being in a novel world, mentally or physically. It can be something as simple as the garden in our backyard, but there are a number of things there to evoke fascination and take us away. And as Kaplan said, it requires compatibility. It's being in an environment where one feels comfortable and able to complete necessary actions. Gardening, we know how to do it. We know how to learn how to do it. It's not something that is going to task our mind. Nature and gardening provide all of these elements and is a restorative place to be. The famed landscape architect Friedrich Law Olmsted, who developed Central Park and other areas, observed, many years ago that spending time in nature simultaneously calms our nervous system, but it enlivens us. One of the reasons for this is posited by Dr. Esther Sternberg, who said she believes a lot of this has to do with the color green. She calls color green that default mode for our brains. Again, going back to the hunter-gatherer times. So this is a perfect way that a garden can be a source of fascination, calming, and awe for us. So the definition of awe, that's a tough one. It can mean many things to many people. In essence, it's a feeling of wonder. One of the ways that awe works is it focuses our attention on the present moment, and that expands our perception of time. In general, we often feel that we don't have enough time. Awe makes time stand still. We enter that feeling of flow and lose track of time. I took this photo on a very busy afternoon. I looked out from my kitchen, saw that the tulips were blooming. My irises, with the warmth in Northern Virginia, had already popped. And I thought, if I don't get out there and take this photo now, it's going to be gone. It was a fleeting moment. But once I got out there, I did linger. It gave me a sense of calm to go back in and tackle the rest of my to-do list. Many times we can experience awe intentionally by just getting out and taking a walk. Even just viewing scenes of nature can support our psychological well-being. In the 1980s, Dr. Roger Ulrich did one of the first studies to prove that scenes of nature could calm and actually relieve pain. He did a study of patients within a hospital setting. Those that could look out onto a garden or a natural setting and those who faced a brick wall. The patients who had that view asked for less pain reliever and were released from the hospital at least a day earlier. So we know it works. Dr. Kellner, a psychologist at UC Berkeley, says that part of this is because awe activates the vagal nerve in our spines that regulate heart rate and deepen breathing. It calms us. He also states that it can help quiet the negative talk that goes on in our mind. You know, the monkey mind that goes back and forth, impacting our health and well-being, telling us we're not enough this, we're not enough that, and being critical. But awe also promotes curiosity and draws us out of ourselves. Kellner has said, awe is that unique emotion that turns us away from narrow focus and toward more social interaction. Rachel Salzberg, another psychologist, had said, awe can be reduced to the absence of self-preoccupation. According to Florence Williams, and I don't know whether you have read her book, it's a wonderful book called The Nature Fix. She says awe wants to be shared. Why else are there so many photos of sunsets, flowers, and rainbows on Instagram and Facebook? But how does this work in real life? For the patients that I see every Tuesday, it provides a respite from the clinical settings that they're involved in that building behind the planter here. The gym where the physical therapy is done, the clinical settings where treatments are performed. It gets them out and away, going back to the restorative environment. It's a sense of being away, and it's a sense of awe. Nothing like being able to go out there, cut some of those zinnias, or pinch back basil. Oftentimes, what I hear from a patient is, after the end of an hour session, that's just what I needed. I feel so much better. Okay, I'm ready to go back at it. So is it any wonder that people rediscovered gardening during the first years of the pandemic? Here you can see more. The woman that you see to the left of the screen has spent time in the gym with physical therapy, working on her endurance and stability, but it was a matter of a stopwatch. There she's working with one of the recreation therapists to cut back some of the dead pieces on our cucumber plant and do some weighting. And while she's unaware, Ted has the stopwatch going, but she's totally distracted and thoroughly enjoying being out in the sunshine and engaging with those plants. So this you may have seen. This is one of my all-time favorite memes from the pandemic. And I think it's true. I know that's exactly how I feel when my seeds start to germinate under lights. Who needs March madness? I've got my April madness with those seedlings. I personally find the fascination and awe in all of that. So while I was preparing to come speak with you all this evening, I'm sitting at my computer, feeling a little hunched, trying to do some research, and I'm wearing down. I thought, what a great afternoon to take a break and test out the attention restoration theory. The seedlings that you see on the right were planted about 4 to 5 weeks ago, and they're getting a little bit tight in that container. So I spent about an hour just transferring them to larger pots, working with those green plants, being outside and being away. And it did the trick. It really did restore my energy. If you'd like to read more, 3 of the books that I cited here tonight, which are excellent and easy reads. The Nature Fix by Florence Williams. She talks a little bit more about being engaged in nature over a several-day period. Whereas Sue Stewart Smith, who is a psychologist in Great Britain, she focuses on a number of ways that she has used the garden with her patients and how she herself has benefited. And of course, Richard Louv, most well known for his book, The Last Child in the Woods, has also written The Nature Principle, where he talks about this reconnection. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, Dina.
Speak to some of the work you've done as a horticultural therapist.
I have been happy to work with, over the course of the time that I've been a hort therapist, I've worked with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I've worked with a group involved with churches dealing with grief. And then most of my work has been with individuals going through the inpatient rehab at Mount Vernon. And it's a second career for me, but it is one that I have just thoroughly enjoyed, seeing how people do come alive when they're interacting with plants, getting out of themselves and focusing on using that involuntary attention.
Do you work for an organization that does that, or a business, or is this a independent?
No, I'm working solely as an individual.
Gotcha.
I had taken my training with the Horticultural Therapy Institute in Denver. They're affiliated with Colorado State University. And it was one of those programs where you would be together for a week and then spend 3 weeks at home working on, coursework. And then, of course, the 480-hour internship I did with Catholic Charities in Towson, Maryland. And that was working under the supervision of a practicing registered horticultural therapist and learning the ropes and applying what I had learned.
Oh, let me check the chat box here. Do you offer any other training or information about this topic?
I think what I can do is point people to the American Horticultural Therapy Association's website to learn more. That's a great resource. It includes the Journal of Therapeutic Horticulture. It talks about the training that's available if someone wants to pursue this further. I know there are Master Gardener programs within Virginia that are beginning to offer what is known as therapeutic horticulture, a little bit less goal-oriented than what we do with patients at Mount Vernon, but it is a way to increase well-being and socialization, because who's better socializers than gardeners who share their plants and their expertise?
What was that website again?
It's the American Horticultural Therapy Association, AHT.
I'm sorry, I'm just putting it in the chat box, AHT.org.
A.org.
I see another question here. Can Jan speak about the preparation that she completed for her certification for horticultural therapist?
Sure. I personally, I had done the Master Gardener program in Loudoun County, loved the classes, and started taking classes at Northern Virginia Community College in their hort technology, and kind of went that route before I discovered horticultural therapy. So to become a registered HTR, you need 9 credits in horticultural therapy, 12 credits in psychology and social sciences. Some of that involves physiology and anatomy. And then your horticulture classes, basically plant propagation, pest management, things like that. That's another 9 credits. So it ends up being about 36 credits overall in coursework. And then, of course, 480 hours of supervised work under an HTR who is part of AHTA's registration program. And part of that as well during the internship, you're doing 2 projects, one that is short-term, one that is long-term. And the long-term one that I did with Catholic Charities was to revive gardens, raised beds that had been built by Eagle Scouts and years ago abandoned. So we were able to put in a more permanent garden for them to use. And the short term was then developing the curriculum that they could use with the clients during the day.
So when you're doing this work, you go to different organizations or people's gardens or places where so you're doing it
Right.
in the community.
In the community, a number of, you can use horticultural therapy in a number of settings, and it's used in hospitals, certainly senior centers, assisted living centers is another popular area. A number of my colleagues work with children with autism in certain programs. So it has a wide variety of applications. With individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's often used as a way of vocational training so that the care of those plants is getting individuals to know what the process is, helping them build the necessary job skills so that they can then be employed elsewhere in the community.
Okay. I have another one. Somebody's asking, are there a lot of opportunities for work in this field locally?
I will be brutally honest about hort therapy. I think we are coming along. I think there's been a great interest in gardening, but many hort therapists have actually had to create their own programs. With Mount Vernon, I was fortunate. There was a recreation therapist there who happens to be a gardener. We were put in touch with each other by a mutual friend, but we had to create that program. You're not going to go out and see a job listing for a hort therapist, but there are a number of ways that these programs can be created.
What are you working on right now, Jan?
Right now, I am solely focused on Mount Vernon and the hospital work. We were fortunate enough to win a National Garden Bureau grant 2 years ago, which allowed us to expand our raised beds. And we're putting in a number of other beds this year. So just trying to make the most of the growing season coming up. And of course, with any organization, there's turnover. So I'm working with new physical therapists, occupational therapists who have not been exposed to hort therapy, and working with them to incorporate horticultural therapy into their routines with patients.
Very good. I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any other questions. Okay, I put the website on the chat for everybody. It's ahta.org. We're recording this, so if you missed any of it, Jean Fenwick will get a recording. We'll also upload it to Loudoun County Public Library YouTube's YouTube channel. We continue this series every month, the Master Gardeners online. So please keep your eyes open at library.loudoun.gov for our upcoming programs. We do them online monthly, except for June. We're going to do one in person at the Lavender Farm in Percival. So please check it out and please keep attending. We'd love to have you. Let's see. Somebody put awesome, pun intended.
Very good.
I think we're all set. Oh, somebody said it is fascinating and Jan's professionalism is impressive. Thank you
Oh,
very
thank
much
you.
for conducting this session.
Thank you so much for having me.